You know, long before Sigmund Freud became famous for mapping the human psyche, he went on a totally different kind of journey. This was an ambitious, self-funded, and deeply personal dive into a substance he was convinced was a miracle drug. This is the story of that experiment, its incredible promise, and its absolute catastrophic failure. All right, let's get into it.
And it really all kicks off with Freud's own words. He's writing to his fiancée Martha, and he's describing his very first experience with this new powder. And listen to that description. He's not just a detached scientist here. He's a man feeling this profound, almost magical shift. And that feeling, well, that's what started the obsession.
And that really is the heart of our story. Picture it, Vienna, 1884. We've got this 27-year-old neurologist, brilliant, but broke, and absolutely desperate to make a name for himself. And he truly believes he's found the key, not just to fame and fortune, but a solution to some of medicine's toughest problems.
So what was going on at the time? Well, Freud was working these insane hours at a hospital, getting very little recognition. He was actively hunting, searching for that one groundbreaking discovery that would let him finally marry his fiancée and set up his own practice. He needed a win, he needed a miracle, and he thought he'd found it.
This timeline really shows you just how fast this all snowballed. I mean, in late '83, he's just reading some army reports about cocaine. A couple of months later, he's so convinced that he actually dips into his fiancée's dowry money to buy his first gram. And by the start of '84, he's his own first guinea pig, finding it lets him power through 36-hour shifts like it's nothing. To him, the promise felt very, very real. But here's the thing about Freud. Personal experience wasn't enough. He was a man of science through and through. He needed hard data, he needed proof. So he launched this formal, really rigorous study on himself, which he would eventually publish in his famous paper, Über Coca, which just means on coca.
And let's be super clear here, this was not some casual recreational use. I mean, just look at his methods. Over a 90-day period, he documents 57 separate doses. He's using a dynamometer to precisely measure his grip strength, a high-tech chronoscope to measure his reaction times down to the millisecond. And the crucial part, he's comparing all of it against a placebo. This was a serious, self-funded clinical trial where he was the only subject.
And this table just perfectly illustrates why he got so excited. The data from his perspective was undeniable. On cocaine, his grip strength shot up by over 4 kilograms, while the placebo actually saw a tiny decrease. His reaction time got significantly faster. And just look at the mood rating, more than double the placebo. The numbers seemed to scream at him. This was a wonder drug.
So he rushes to publish his 8,000-word paper, and he makes 4 absolutely spectacular claims. He says cocaine could cure the terrible problem of morphine addiction, that it could treat depression, that it could fix digestive issues, and then, almost as an afterthought, he mentions it might work as a local anesthetic. These weren't small claims, they were huge, especially that first one.
And it was that first claim, the bold idea that cocaine could cure morphine addiction, that would turn his dream into an absolute nightmare. This is the moment where his theory, backed by all his careful data, smashes head-on into a tragic human reality.
You see, the patient wasn't just some random person. He was Ernst von Fleischl-Marxow, a respected colleague, a kind of mentor, and a very close friend. Fleischl was terribly addicted to morphine, which he started taking for chronic pain. So for Freud, this was it. This was the chance to save his friend and prove his groundbreaking theory all at once. The stakes just could not have been higher.
In this timeline, it just shows the horrifying result. In June, things look okay, but just 2 months later, the dose is tripled, and Fleischl starts having these awful paranoid hallucinations. By October, he's taking a massive dose and has a complete psychotic break. Freud's cure had become its own, much more terrible disease.
By February of 1885, his friend was consuming this much cocaine every single day, over 3 grams. It's a staggering, unbelievably toxic dose. The situation got so bad they had to put him back on morphine just to manage the horrifying effects of the cocaine. The experiment was a total, devastating failure. Fleischl died a few years later, a victim of both addictions.
And here it is. In a private letter, not for the public, Freud admits his guilt and this terrible realization. The miracle drug wasn't a substitute for morphine at all. It was, in his own words, a third poison. The weight of that failure, of what happened to his friend, would stay with him for the rest of his life.
But the disaster didn't even end there. While Freud was reeling from this personal tragedy, he was about to suffer a massive professional humiliation. And ironically, it came directly from a detail buried in his own paper.
Hey, remember that list of 4 miracle claims? That last one was basically a throwaway line, a little footnote where he casually mentioned that cocaine seemed to make his tongue and other mucous membranes go numb. He didn't think much of it at all, and that was a world-changing mistake.
Because while Freud was all in on the morphine cure, he gave a sample of his cocaine to a colleague, an ophthalmologist named Carl Koller. Now look at this contrast. Freud has the idea, but he just kind of tests it on his own tongue and moves on. Koller reads that footnote and immediately tests the solution on a frog's eye. It goes completely numb, and in that instant, he realizes its incredible potential for eye surgery. And so, just a month later, while Freud is still dealing with the Fleischl disaster, Carl Koller gets up in front of a major medical conference. He demonstrates a painless eye surgery using cocaine as a local anesthetic, and the place erupts. He gets a standing ovation. The discovery revolutionized surgery overnight, and all the credit, all the fame, the legacy that Freud so desperately wanted, it all went to Koller.
So, in the end, where did all of this leave Freud? His grand theory was in shambles, his friend was dying, and his one single correct claim had been snatched up by somebody else. Now came the fallout. And if we look at his own clinic notes, we can see that the Fleischl case, tragically, wasn't a one-off. Out of 17 patients he treated with cocaine, more than half of them developed a tolerance, needing more and more to get any effect. And 3 of them, 3 had psychotic episodes. The evidence against his own claims was piling up in his own files.
This table really just lays it all out, doesn't it? The claim to cure morphine addiction, a catastrophic failure. His claim it was a safe stimulant, just false. We know over half his patients developed the tolerance, and the claim it could be a local anesthetic, well, that one was right, but he didn't follow through and he lost all the credit. It was, from a scientific standpoint, a complete and total rout.
The consequences were pretty severe. By 1887, he had to publicly retract his biggest claim. His professional reputation was damaged for years. The press took to calling him a cocaine advocate. But you know, the most profound consequence wasn't public. The trauma of this whole episode seemed to burrow deep into his own psyche, and it later showed up in his famous book, The Interpretation of Dreams, disguised as a dream about a failed injection. It was a clear symbol of the guilt he carried with him.
And that leaves us with one last fascinating question to think about. Freud's first big attempts to understand the mind was a disaster, right? One built on chemistry. He learned the hard way about the seductive danger of miracle cures and about the deep, unseen forces of addiction and self-destruction. So you really have to wonder, how did this profound failure, this massive burden of guilt, end up shaping the man who would turn away from drugs entirely and instead dedicate his life to mapping the hidden, complex territories of the human conscience itself?